Welcome into Sportsmemo's betting podcast for June 19th. It's Wednesday. We're going over all things soccer. MLS, every game on the board. We got Women's World Cup, Copa America, Gold Cup update with Nick Borrman on Twitter at Borman00. Nick, welcome into the podcast. How are you?
Hey, Drew. I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm back in the States from Costa Rica, and I'll tell you this, man. They love soccer down there, man. It was soccer on every TV. I was into it because, of talking to you on these podcasts and betting it a little bit. So it's a fun sport to bet, man. I'll tell you. So I'm excited to get your opinion.
Yeah, they got off to a good start. They won 4-0 in their opening game of the Gold Cup, so I'm sure they were happy as can be down there.
They were. A funny story about that, I was actually at my friend's house that's from Nicaragua, and so they were kind of rooting for Nicaragua, and I guess Nicaragua doesn't really play soccer, so Costa Rica really took it to them, huh?
Yeah, they did. They beat them up pretty good.
But, hey, first on the docket here, we got the Women's World Cup update, and you're off to a good start, man. 12-4, 75% out the gate here. What have you seen so far, and what do you expect going forward that the listeners can use and maybe grab a couple winners here in the Women's World Cup?
Well, good question. One thing that's kind of been on the horizon the last couple of years is that the women's game is growing and becoming more popular, and countries are starting to invest a little bit more money into their women's programs. Just in the last edition in 2015, they expanded the tournament to 24 teams for the first time, which is the same it is this year. So you're seeing more teams get in it, and because of that, you're seeing more countries, like I said, kind of getting behind it. So right now the women's game is still very top heavy. I mean, USA, is the number one team in the world, the defending champs, leaps and bounds ahead of some of the other teams in this competition. And there's four teams maybe that have a legit chance to win this, and that's about it. And then it drops off after those top really 10, 12 teams quite a bit. But the gap between the top and the bottom is shrinking. So it's good for the game. Right now, if you look back, we're 2.5 rounds in there's 3 group stage games for each team, and right now there's only 6 left. So there's been 30 of the 36 group stage games played. If you look at the results of all of these, to kind of back up my thoughts, there is that we've seen dogs cover 17 of the 30 games, and the favorites cover just 10, and there's been 3 pushes. So what you're seeing is just a lot of inflated lines, kind of based on perception. And one thing I noticed is some of these lines that have come out in the second round and now into the third round are, in my opinion, way too inflated from what happened in maybe game 1 or game 2. Like, take Thailand, for example. I'm sure you saw the 13-0 scoreline that everybody was talking about with the USA.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, Nick, is you bring up the fact that underdogs are covering, but I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that just casual fans like me that would go, whoa, what happened? Because didn't the U.S. beat them by like 10 or more or something crazy?
Yeah, 13-0, right? So obviously they covered that line. But what's been going on is, you have these lines out there. So the U.S. was favored by 5 goals in that game. So -5 favorites. Big number to lay. I didn't touch it. But USA, as I mentioned, the best team in the world. Hard to compete with those guys. And then the very next game, Thailand was playing Sweden, and Sweden opened as a -6 favorite. So you're talking about a full goal difference now based on that one result earlier. Everybody just going, oh my God, 0-13, these guys must be awful, or USA's that good, or, soccer's a weird game. Things, once you get down so much, you kind of give up. I mean, you play this in any sport, there's not a lot of trying anymore. So 0-13 very well could have been just 0-6 as well if they maybe had the same kind of fire the entire game. But my point is that as you got to that second game for Sweden, a team that's a good team, but not on the level of the U.S., to open as a full goal more of a favorite based on really what happened in that first game, it sort of had a scratch in my head at that line. The sharp money that was out there, the money that was coming in on the game anyway, certainly saw the same thing I did, and that ended up coming down to 5.25 at kickoff, so it dropped quite a bit, and people were getting behind Thailand. I as well got behind Thailand in that one at 5.5, and they won. They covered that rather easily, really. So, you're just seeing a lot of volatility right now in these markets, and it's been nice. I mean, I've been able to capitalize, as you mentioned, I got off to a good start. I've been able to back a lot of the dogs because the lines just seem, that first round seemed okay, but the second round and into this third round have really moved too much. And the same thing happened with Jamaica yesterday. They were a full goal more of an underdog than they were either the first two games against a team that was the same caliber as the first two games. So it's just stuff was kind of moving, I think, too much and has been. And I just don't think there's, the odds makers, I don't think they have a lot of information on these teams. It's probably a market I'm sure they would agree with. They're not, too sharp on getting good numbers out there. And it's even, even for myself and other people that are betting it, you're not going to go out there and find a ton of information on these teams. You gotta dig deep and you gotta find whatever you can. But I'm using a lot of, numbers that I use in the men's game, and then kind of, applying those in the same situations. And I don't know, when I see these lines moving so much as they are, something's off. And so far it's been working. So, as we go forward and we get into the knockout rounds, it'll only be the top 16 teams. We're going to see those lines start to shrink down, and we'll see how we do. Like I said, I only think there's probably a handful of teams, Germany, France, USA, of course, that really have a chance to win this thing. And as you go back to, the favorites in this tournament, they're still winning. I mean, if you look at the standings right now, the teams you expected to make the group stage are the ones going to make the group stage. But they're just not covering. So we'll see what happens when these lines come out as we get to the knockout rounds. Hopefully we'll still see some numbers that are head scratchers. But that's really what I've been focusing on these first rounds. And I'm kind of looking at the same thing now as we get into the second round of the next two tournaments we'll talk about with the Copa America and the Gold Cup. They've all played one game, and the same thing I'm going to be looking for as we get into round 2 and round 3 there as well.
Good stuff, Nick. Breaking down the women's tournament. A couple of things that I take out there is, you bring up the discrepancy between the top teams and the bottom teams, and anytime, in my opinion, when you're talking women's sports and betting on women's sports, the one that I'm most closely related to is the UFC. And we see it there, as far as, one girl will just get in the octagon and it's really not a fair fight to the point where, you'll get minus 1,500, minus 2,000 favorites. And, the underdog just doesn't really have as much of a chance, not like the men's game where, one punch can kind of change it. It can in the women's game. And do you see it that way in soccer where, there's really almost no way Thailand can beat the U.S. Or is it, like you said, getting closer to where underdogs, like you said, are covering, so the market, the odds makers are kind of overdoing that sentiment where the favorites are really crushing the underdogs?
Good question. I would say it's moving in the direction that the example you bring up there with Thailand, coming against the U.S. No. I mean, a lot of books didn't even offer a money line price just because it would have to be, I saw one price out there like minus 10,000. So, I mean, no, probably not on some of the teams yet. But what I'm noticing is that it's shrinking, and that the teams that were what you consider mid-tier are definitely catching up to the top tier. And the teams that were bottom tier are catching up to the mid-tier. So it's still not quite there, and it's going to take some more time. I mean, who knows how many years it's going to be, but it's moving in that direction, but it's not there yet. And okay. UFC, you bring up a good point. I mean, maybe that's the same thing. They're both UFC. I feel like is, especially on the women's side, is still relatively new. And anything that's new like that takes a long time to get more and more competition in there, more competitors to try, and then eventually it'll probably start to even out a little bit.
Yep, makes sense. And Nick is 12-4, 75% out the gate in the Women's World Cup, and you can get all of his plays at sportsmemo.com. And what I would recommend is the Soccer Summer Tournaments package for just $99. And if you use the coupon code SOCCER, SOCCER, soccer at checkout, it will take an extra $20 off, so you can get all of his soccer plays in that tournament package for just $79, and it starts pretty much activated right when you get it, and you'll get the next 30 days. Nick, is that how that works?
The tournaments run through the 7th of July, so it's about 3 weeks right now.
Okay, so yep, good package there for just $79. His soccer tournaments package with the coupon code SOCCER at checkout will give it to you for just $79. We got the Copa America up next here, Nick, and you're off to a good start in this, man. 5-2, 71% out the gate through the first round of the group stage. Anything stand out that you saw from the opening games here?
Really, what stood out to me is that going into this tournament, Brazil is they're hosting this tournament. So I'll give you a little background on the tournament itself. This is a South American competition. There's 12 teams that play in this. 10 are from South America, and they always have to kind of invite a couple in to round out the field. So Japan and Qatar are actually in it this year. U.S. Competed
why wouldn't they invite the U.S.? That would make more
normally
sense.
the U.S. did. They competed in it last time in 2016, but this year the U.S. is in the Gold Cup, which we'll talk about next. But one thing I was looking at, some history with the Copa America, I don't understand, is that they've been very random in their years that they're competing. You go back to 2000 and prior, they competed every other year. Okay, that makes sense. But since then, they've competed 3 years apart, 4 years apart, then back-to-back years. So it was 2001, 2004, 2007, 2011, so that now goes to 4 years, 2015, and then back-to-back again in 16, and now in 2019. So I don't know what the reasoning is for the random schedule, but of course the Gold Cup does do it every other year. So this year the U.S. is playing in that competition as they're defending their title from 2 years ago. So that's why they're not in it. But anyway, it's a South American competition. Brazil is the host, so all the games being played in Brazil, and every time that the tournament has been played in Brazil, Brazil has won it. So they are for sure the favorites going into this, and still are as far as the odds makers goes. But what I've noticed from them so far is it's not the same Brazil team that we've seen in the past. They're not quite as dynamic. They're deep for sure. They got a ton of good players, ton of big names that are on the team. Neymar is one that is not playing right now with an ankle injury, which I don't think really hurts them. I mean, he certainly can be a help to the team. He's a good offensive weapon when he's on, but he's also a distraction, and he can take away negative, kind of bring a negative vibe to the team. So I don't think he's hurt not being there. But so far through two games, they played their second game last night. They played to a draw against Venezuela, 0-0, which is fine with me. I was on Venezuela plus 2.25, so happy with that result. But they just haven't looked as good offensively so far in the first two games as they have in the past in this competition. So, I still think they're probably, the favorite, and it's their tournament to lose, but they have to get better on the attack. They've had a lot of possession in those two games, but their shot attempts have they haven't been very good. They haven't had really good quality chances. So we'll see what happens as they go forward. But right now they're kind of the team I'm surprised about mostly through the first couple of games. Group B, they're in Group A. In Group B, Colombia, Argentina and Colombia were the top two favorites. Colombia beat Argentina 2-0 on opening day, so that was a surprising scoreline. Watching some of that game and checking some of the stat lines, Argentina actually, performed a little bit better, had more shot chances, but that's soccer. It's you got to make them when you get them. So Colombia actually won 2-0 and now are in the driver's seat to win that group. Top two teams will make it from each group, so Argentina will still most likely make it to the knockout round. And then Group C is a little bit more up in the air with Uruguay and Chile. They're both very good teams. Either one of them could honestly win. So they both won their opening game 4-0. The other teams are well below their caliber. So don't know who's going to win that one. But like I said, I think it's still Brazil's tournament to lose. We'll see what happens as they go forward. But they have to get better on the offensive side of the ball. So we'll see what happens in the next couple weeks before we get to the knockout rounds.
And when are these games in the Copa America Cup?
As far as like what they're every day right now, and because they're in the same time zone as us in the States here, they're in the evenings usually. They're at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, as late as 10 o'clock. So you can catch them later in the evenings.
Okay. Next up, we got the Gold Cup, Nick, and you're off to a quick start here. 3-0-1, 100%. Haven't lost yet. And USA played just last night. They won 4-0. First off, can you explain a little bit to the listeners, like the Gold Cup, what countries are in it? It's Central America, Mexico, U.S., and Canada?
Yep, North America, Central America. So exactly right. Canada, U.S., Mexico are the big three countries, and then you have a lot of the Central America or Caribbean teams that are in there. So there are a lot of small nations. They don't have a fighting chance really in this competition. It's USA and Mexico's tournament to lose. You have to go back all the way to 2000 to find a team that wasn't US or Mexico that has won this thing. So
what about Costa Rica?
They play every other year. Costa Rica is a good team, but they haven't won it. And honestly, they're in the. I don't have the numbers in front of me. They were either the third or the fourth betting favorite going into the tournament. They're a good team. They're going to, going back to what we were talking about with with the women's and the disparity between the teams. Mm-hmm. They're a team that's going to compete with U.S. and Mexico, and ultimately they probably will come up just a little bit short, especially Mexico. I think this is Mexico's tournament to lose, but they're going to compete with U.S. They're going to give U.S. and Mexico all they can handle, and I wouldn't be surprised if they get a result against either team in the group stage. But I ultimately think that Mexico's going to win this thing. But they're a good team. I know you got a little bit of cheering for them as you go down there and you live there for a while. So they're a good team and fun team to watch for sure.
Yeah, I remember the U.S. beat Costa Rica for the Gold Cup championship 2-0, I believe, the last Gold Cup, right?
Actually, I think they beat Costa Rica in the semis. Okay. And then we beat Honduras, I want to say. I'd have to look up to see. They won 2-0 in the final. I forget who it was. But yeah, they did beat Costa Rica. I think it was the semis, and it was a good game. It wasn't, Costa Rica's not a team that's going to get rolled over by any means by either one of those teams, but they're just a little bit under the level that the U.S. and Mexico has right now.
And you would say Mexico's the favorite?
Yeah, they were the favorite going into it. Really, U.S. and Mexico, like I said, before the tournament, Mexico was at plus 135 as the betting favorite to win, which for a future is not that great. They're actually they're now at minus 110. So after one game for them and U.S., I agree with the move. I mean, Mexico looked fantastic in their first game. Cuba, who they played, they won huge. But the way they played together, the way they moved the ball around the field, looked very good. And, again, Cuba is not a great team. It's hard to say that will continue all the way through the tournament, but they look strong. The players, they got a lot of really good players. They have a new coach this year, Tata Martino, who led the Atlanta United actually to the MLS Cup last year. And he's been Argentina's national team. He was the coach there. He was the coach over at Barcelona. So he's a big name coach. So he's got a lot of, background in these type of tournaments and on the big stage. So they look good in their first game. The U.S., you just mentioned it. They won 4-0 last night against Guyana, which, again, going back to the disparity of the teams here, Guyana's not a good team. But honestly, they didn't look that great winning that game. The score will show you that they won it, and it wasn't much of a match, but I wasn't impressed. Leading up to this tournament as well, a lot of lead-up games with the U.S. They haven't performed very well. They have a lot of new players. They have a new manager themselves this year, so they have a lot of question marks right now, and I think this is going to be a good tournament for them. I think they're going to perform well. I think they're going to come up short, ultimately to Mexico, and it's going to be good experience for these guys. Like I said, a lot of the guys on the team you look at are 21, 22, 23 years old, haven't played in these type of tournaments yet before. So it'll be good experience for them, and hopefully they can rectify their failure to qualify for the World Cup last time out in 2018. So I think this will be a good experience for them to start to build towards that 2022 World Cup. But I like Mexico here to win this one.
Okay, sounds good, Nick. And guys, we got the MLS Every Game on the Board podcast coming up. We're going to quick hit all these games on the MLS slate. But Nick, before we get to it, I want to ask you an overall kind of handicapping question here, because we do have these international tournaments going on, and I know a lot of the American bettors are kind of new to this as far as like a player playing on one team and then he also plays on another team. How do you factor that into the handicap as far as one, getting the information, and two, how often do these guys, play 2 games a week or something like that?
It's a big time factor. So what happens is you have your regular league game. So we're talking about the MLS right now that goes, all throughout the summer here in the States. And then the players, the best players on the teams are going to get called up for what they call international duty, which is where we're at right now. So any country that's competing in the Copa America or the Gold Cup, or there's actually in Africa, they have the Cup of Nations League or tournament, which starts Friday. So if you have anybody, that's on the national teams, they're going to get called up and called away from their domestic MLS duties. So national duty always trumps MLS duties, and really in any league, this goes to Europe, this goes to anywhere. So it's kind of just part of the way the game has been played for a long time, for years and years and years, and it's just the way the sport works, where country pride comes first, and the clubs in Europe, they're smart about it. don't schedule games and they take a week or two off for international breaks. The U.S., the MLS hasn't done that in the years past, and they've started to do that a little bit this year. They took a break. They're on a 2-week break right now, but they're starting back up this weekend, and they're going to be missing. There's like 108, I think is the number, players in the MLS that are gone for international duty. So to say it's not a factor would definitely be incorrect to do so. So it certainly is a big factor here. They're only going to be playing for the international team, so they don't come back. They don't play for the MLS intermittently, but once their teams are knocked out of the competition, then they'll come back and join their team. So you can just go to MLS.com. They have updates right there of current rosters and who is missing for each team on international duty. So it's easy to find the information, but then of course trying to adjust, just like LeBron James, what's the market influence he has if he's if he's playing one game or not, how many points does that adjust, and trying to make your own adjustments is always the tough part.
Well, and that's a great handicapping kind of philosophy question as well, because you bring up LeBron James and the sport of basketball, even college basketball even more. One player matters a lot more than, let's say, the NFL. So where would you say, soccer is on that spectrum of the best player on the team coming back? Would you say it's more like LeBron James, or would you say it's more like the starting right guard on an NFL team where the backup might be almost as good?
I would say probably more like the starting right guard. Maybe depending on the exact position they have. If you have just like a world class striker like Ronaldo or something like that, perhaps a little bit more than that, but never. Still not to the level of a LeBron James that's contributing 30% of the offense that the team has. So I would say the backups are good replacements, not as good, obviously. So depending on the players, you're not going to see huge moves. I think what happens is there's opportunity from a public perception, and I think this happens in all the markets. When you get a big name player to move, you're like, oh God, LeBron James isn't playing this week. They're not going to be able to beat anybody. And how are they going to be favored by this? And so the markets kind of move the number more than they know they need to, because the betting public's going to adjust for it on the other side too much. And I think the same thing happens in soccer a little bit. Sometimes, a goal line may be moved a half a goal, 3/4 of a goal. Not many times will it go a full goal, but if it does, it's just kind of a perception from the public side of them thinking, hey, the public's probably going to back this team now because Ronaldo's not playing, where it probably shouldn't move that much. So I always look kind of the opposite. I say, all right, well, did it move too much? Was there an adjustment made, and did it move too much? But I would say it's not nearly as important as it is in basketball, for sure.
All right, Nick, let's get into this every game on the board podcast. Let's quick hit it here for time concerns. But we got LA Galaxy at Cincinnati. Cincinnati at Pick'em, total of 2.75.
Yeah, we'll go quick here. So real quick, both teams are missing players. Cincinnati's got 5 guys missing this week. 2 of their most important forwards are gone. Defensively, they've been terrible all year. Offensively, they've been terrible all year. So they're missing 2 guys from both sides of the ball that are very important to this team. They haven't been able to score goals. Now they're missing their 2 most important forwards. I don't know what you can expect from these guys this week. The Galaxy, they are missing 4 players as well, but really only Jonathan Dos Santos, who's with Mexico, is a kind of a major concern. The other players were kind of intermittently used throughout the season. So he's a key for them offensively, but they still have Zlatan Ibrahimovic up front, and I think he'll be enough. Cincinnati, worst team in the league right now anyway. Add in the fact that they're missing these players. I think the only play is is on the Galaxy, and getting them at a pick'em price. So if they draw, it's just a push on the bet or avoid on the bet. I think it's a must play on the Galaxy in this one. I don't see any way you could back Cincy here.
All right, like in the road team, and as I know from talking to you earlier, a bunch of these every game on the board podcast, Nick, home road splits are big in the MLS. So interesting, you like in the road team there. We got Salt Lake at Chicago up next. Chicago -1 goal, total of 3.
Yeah, these 2 teams actually don't have a ton of effect here with the international break. Really, only Salt Lake is missing a notable player, Jefferson Severino. He's a solid midfielder for Salt Lake, but they have really good depth at that position. So kind of going back to who's missing and how much it affects it, I don't think it's going to affect them too much here in this game. Chicago, they were one of the most unpredictable teams in the first half. They look good one game, they look terrible the next game. Most of their success did come at home. They have 4 wins, 3 draws, and just 1 loss. But their wins were against non-playoff teams from last year: Colorado, New England, Minnesota. So not a lot can be said for their wins and their success at home because it hasn't come against any solid teams. Salt Lake, they don't have a good record right now on the road, but in their defense, they've had a really tough schedule. They have just 2 road wins with 6 losses, but all 6 losses are against current playoff teams, unlike Chicago, who we are just comparing to, only beating the worst teams in the league. So, the only 2 teams that Salt Lake did face that were out of the playoffs, they won. They won at Colorado and Cincy, and that's where Chicago stands right now. They stand outside the playoff picture. So I think catching a full goal here, we'll go back to a road team again here, Drew. I think catching the full goal for Salt Lake at +1, I think there's a lot of value there. Chicago, if they win it, it's going to be only by a goal probably, so that would just be a push on the bet. So I like Salt Lake to earn a draw at least and cover this match.
All right, Nick, liking 2 roadies to start. We got Nick Borrman on the podcast here talking all of the MLS games. 20-6, 77%, plus almost 40 units combined start to the summer tournament series, talking all the soccer tournaments in that one. And you can get his soccer summer tournaments package at sportsmemo.com using the coupon code SOCCER at checkout for an extra $20 off. So for just $79, you can get all of his soccer plays on sportsmemo.com, where you can also check out his official free play, which is on Dallas here. Toronto at Dallas minus a half a goal. Any quick hitters here, because the listeners can read the full analysis at sportsmemo.com, Nick?
Yeah, quickly, it goes back to the international break here. Toronto is missing basically their entire attacking core. Michael Bradley, Jonathan Osorio, and Josie Altidore. Without Altidore this year, they've struggled mightily offensively. And it'll be even worse without the other 2 guys in the lineup. They still have one playmaker, Pozuelo, but that's going to let Dallas really key in on him. So Dallas, they're already a good home team. Toronto missing, like I said, their entire offense. It's got to be a Dallas play on this one, and that is my official free play this week. So I like Dallas at home here to get this win.
Nick, you bring up Bradley, and he's one guy I can remember from the last World Cup qualifying, and I believe the World Cup before that. So I think he's getting up there in age. And I always thought, I never thought he was that good, man. Like I thought he held the team back a little bit. You think he's a good player?
He's one of those guys that's he does so much. If you know the game of soccer, you'll know what his contributions are and the way he can control the middle of the field and the way he can help the teammates, setting them up, doing that. I mean, if you're looking for him on the stat line, you're not going to find him. And he's a great captain. He's a great leader. He's a great locker room type of a guy. So at this point, yeah, he's getting up in age. The younger players they have, I would agree with what you're saying there. I would think they're probably more talented at this point, and I think he's on his way of getting phased out. But he's such a good presence and positive guy and good leader to have in the clubhouse. I think, that's what you're seeing still as we go on into this tournament. And who knows if he'll be called up in future ones. But I think that's what you're seeing right now is just kind of hanging on to those last couple times for him. But he does contribute, and he has over the years, kind of with just the smaller stuff, controlling the midfield, setting up other players. And he's really good at what we call marking, where he's able to identify one defender, kind of track him throughout the field and not let that guy really contribute on the other side. So some smaller things you don't see as much in the stat line.
But if you had to say, will he be on the starting World Cup, U.S. roster for the next World Cup or not? Would you say yes or no?
Depends what the market puts that line out as, but I would say no. I would say I don't think he's going to be. I think he may still make the team, but I don't think he's going to be one of the starting 11.
Okay, we got Colorado at Vancouver up next. Vancouver north of the border here, laying a half a goal, total at 2.75.
Yes, so I guess one benefit here to being a crappy team like Colorado is that when you go on these international breaks, you don't have a lot of players worthy of national team duties. So they kind of benefit on these weeks. They don't have anybody missing. Vancouver, on the other hand, they're going to be missing their starting keeper and several midfielders and defenders for this match. So originally, this line makes a lot of sense with Vancouver being favored at home. But with all of the absences here and the fact that Colorado, when they were heading into the break, they were probably honestly one of the hottest teams in the league. They were unbeaten in 5 matches. They had 4 wins and 1 draw, which was coming directly after the worst start in MLS history. So they turned it around, and perhaps the break was kind of unwanted for them to cool off their momentum. But I think the fact that they did have some momentum then, the fact that Vancouver's missing all these guys, I think you got to take Colorado here. I think +5 is good value on them to at least earn a draw on this one. So I'm liking the Rapids here on the road.
All right, Nick, we got one more game on Saturday, then we'll finish it up with the Sunday game. We got Houston at Portland. Portland minus 0.75, total of 2.75, Nick.
Yeah, another game affected by the break. At first glance, I was like, Houston is getting a 3/4 of a goal at Portland. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Houston's number 4 in the West. Portland's dead last in the West. But quick look at the international rosters. Houston's missing a ton of key players, 6 of them to be exact, including their best playmaker up front, Albert Ellis, who's got their leading goal scorer. So huge impact for them all over the field. Portland, they're just missing 2 players, and neither one has really been a key piece in the lineup. So there's some obvious adjustment from the odds makers in this line. I think we might have seen Portland as a 1/4 of a goal, maybe a 1/2 a goal favorite without the international break, but definitely have made an adjustment here. So, but you know what? For me, I'd rather skip this one, try to figure out how much all these players kind of weigh into this match. I think there's enough other good games on the board this week. I don't like this one for just too many reasons here.
All right, Nick, we got one game left. And guys, remember, Soccer Summer Tournaments package at sportsmemo.com with the coupon code SOCCER at checkout. You get an extra $20 off from $99 down to $79. Get all of his soccer plays there. Soccer Summer Tournaments package. Last game up on Sunday, Kansas City at Columbus. Columbus minus 0.25, home favorite. Total of 2.75, Nick.
Well, now that you mentioned road teams, I just realized I like Kansas City in this one. So that means that's 4 out of the 5 games I'm previewing. I'm going with the road sides here, except for my free play. So I don't know how that'll work out this week. But Columbus is, again, hurting here with international break. Their keeper, Zach Steffen, who's world class, he's actually leaving for Manchester City on July 9th. So assuming the U.S. makes what's expected to be a deep run in the Gold Cup, we may have seen his last game in Columbus because the Gold Cup is expected to end July 7th, so he may not be back in uniform. They're also missing a couple of key offensive players, Trapp and Zardes. Zardes is their leading goal scorer this year. Kansas City, on the other hand, they look to have a full roster as their international call-ups were actually European players, and they played their Euro qualifiers last week, so they're back on the squad this week. So both solid playoff teams from last year, both disappointing starts to the year this year. They could easily still make their way back in the playoffs, but I think going back with the international break here, I think Kansas City catching a 1/4 of a goal with all the absences that Columbus has is worth the play, and I actually like them to even come in and win this match. They're at around +200 right now to win outright, so that's even worth a few bucks in my mind. But Kansas City is the way to play this one, Drew.
All right, Nick, good stuff as always. Any last words you want to give out to the listeners before we shut this down?
Well, we didn't talk about golf this week. It's good tournament going into coming off. The U.S. Open is a smaller one with the Travelers Championship. So we'll have a package up there. I'm doing well on the golf side right now, so hopefully we'll continue that. U.S. Open, if you guys caught it out there, was an awesome finish. It was cool. I don't know if you caught any of it, Drew. It was really cool when they play out at Pebble like that in a major tournament like this, because it was on until 10 o'clock at night, so prime time golf to watch towards the end of the evening. So hopefully we'll continue good golf picks going into this week. So look to have that up here later this afternoon as well.
Yeah, Nick, and guys, check out his page on the handicapper page. There's a lot of wins up there. You can track all of his plays, and he's doing really good, both soccer and golf. So definitely recommend him. And a lot of discounts right now this time of year, in the sports betting world. So check it out. Cheap stuff there on Nick. Get you on the right side of some of these bets. And Nick, yeah, just I guess the question here, we were talking off air about golf and. What is as far as the winner and being kind of cocky at the end? I don't know. What are your overall thoughts on how both of them played at the end?
Gary Woodland deserved to win that tournament. He was the leader going into the round. It got close. Koepka got it to he started off hot. He birdied 4 of his first 5 or 4 of his first 6 holes, and it was like, oh man, he's coming, he's going to win this thing. But he kind of steadied out after that, and Woodland held his own. It got down to 1 shot late on the back 9, and he made a couple really clutch shots. He hit a 3-wood on the par 5. I think that was 15, and then he hit. I don't know if you saw that chip on the putting green, which most golf course superintendents would never tell you to do. He hit a pitch shot from the putting green from one side to the other because he couldn't putt it, and just picked it perfectly and was able to get par on that hole. So he had 2 just absolutely clutch shots. So he deserved to win. He stepped up when the pressure was there. That was his first major win. So congrats to him. Koepka, we talked about, like you said, a little bit off air, was I found myself rooting for him when I normally don't too much because I like history. He was going for a three-peat of the U.S. Open, which has only been done one other time back in the 1800s. But yeah, he's a guy that about a month ago, before the PGA, he was interviewed and asked about why he performed so well in the majors and what is it about it that makes him play that well. And
yeah.
His answer was pretty arrogant. He said, "Listen, I only really have to. There's only about 30 guys that I have to go out there and beat in these major events that have the talent to win." And he's like, of those, only 12 or 15 have actually proven that they can win. So he was so cocky to the fact that said, I don't really only have to go out and beat 15 players and I can win the thing. That's why I win those majors. So listen, that's pretty arrogant, pretty cocky to say. And one of the kind of reasons I don't not like the guy, but he's not one of the guys I go out there and root for every single week. But I did find myself rooting for him this week just because I like history. So I was hoping he could get that three-peat. But I like Woodland. Congrats to him. But it was an awesome tournament all the way around.
Yeah, man, it's always funny when these guys, because Koepka, his run in majors is pretty amazing what he's been able to do. And we were talking about, the stat that I really liked was it was 13 of 14, I believe, straight major rounds shooting under par. That's pretty crazy, and I believe he improved on that because your stat, Nick, was what he shot 4 straight rounds of in the 60s in Pebble Beach, and that was the first time ever that somebody's done that and then not won the tournament. Correct?
Yeah. First time in U.S. Open history, a player shot all 4 rounds in the 60s and not won. So just goes to show how good Woodland played, and he actually had Woodland had a round not in the 60s, but Koepka has been lights out in these majors, as you said. 13 of 14 rounds under par just speaks to his abilities right now because these are the hardest tournaments in the world. They set them up so these guys fail, and that's usually why we like to watch them, because we like to watch them struggle a little bit like we all do when we go out there.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in. Check out Nick's package, both soccer and golf, plus his free play in the Dallas game. So, Nick, thanks for the time. We'll have you on next Wednesday, and guys, we'll have Robbie Vino on tomorrow talking college football, also MLB. So thanks for tuning in. Best of luck with your bets.